Hi everyone, it's Tox from critshappen.com. Thanks for watching and welcome back. Today I've got a critical review of Star Trek, the original series, the deck building game. Now this is from Bandai, and truth be told, I was a little nervous about going into this one. You see, Bandai is the third largest manufacturer of toys in the world. Toys, not tabletop games, toys. In fact, behind Mattel and Hasbro, they're number 3, and they're more so known for Power Rangers and Thundercats and things like that, which, don't get me wrong, they're cool, but they're not really known for tabletop board games, or at least designer tabletop board games. So I was a little curious about this. Alex, the designer, actually reached out to me and suggested that I put this through its paces for a critical review. It's actually the third in a series of Star Trek games built for deck building games. The first was a Next Generation themed deck building game. Then there was an expansion for that, which could be played on its own or intermingled. And now this, the original series, is the third installment. There's some different rules for this than there are for the original two, but the cards can still be intermixed together. Now, I do not own the original two. I have not played the original two, so I'm not going to compare it too much to those. We're going to talk about this as a standalone game. But as you can see from what's laid out in front of me, this is not your typical deck building game. The rule book is very, very good. It's very direct and to the point. There are a lot of pictures that show you examples around everything from exploring, which we'll get into in a second, searching, which we'll also get into, and combat. Yes, combat. This is a game that is really, in my opinion, unlike any other deck building game I've ever played. It's a little bit of something familiar, it's a little bit of something new. But let's jump into the gameplay. We'll show you how all of what you see in front of me works out. And then we'll come back and we'll give you our final thoughts. But until then, let's set our phasers to stun and boldly go where no man has gone before. In Star Trek, the original series deck building game. So here you see the setup of a game of Star Trek, the original series, the deck building game. To the right, you'll see red shirt ensign, which of course are going to die. You'll see lieutenants and you'll see commanders. Each one of them is worth an additional experience point. So an ensign when played will give you 1 experience point, a lieutenant when played will give you 2, and a commander when played will give you 3. Additionally, they have bonus effects if you complete a mission, which we'll get into in a second. But it's a nice thing to see that the common cards that can be bought at any given time in the game do something more than just provide you a single resource. Then we have the Starbase Deck. The Starbase Deck is always going to have 9 cards in front of it, and this is sort of the common cards that you can buy. If you're a familiar Ascension player, this is the center row. If you're a familiar Thunderstone player, this is the village. But each card in the upper right is going to have the Star Trek symbol and a number which counts as the experience. So if I want to buy Spock, it's going to cost me 9 experience from my hand. One of the interesting concepts is that when you play cards from your hand, you put them into play in what's called your bridge. When the cards are in your bridge, they do 2 different things. And what you'll notice is that each card has some type of ability printed on it. But in addition, it has these 4 colored bars at the bottom. They are green for speed, red for attack, blue for diplomacy, and yellow for shields. These are really important because they're going to be used in the space deck to complete missions and events, and they're going to be used in battle with your starships against your opponent's starships. The whole goal of the game is to amass a certain number of mission points. And mission points are accomplished through the use of the space deck. You'll see this one, for example, has 25. The average game is a 300-point game. In addition, there's an additional scenario that has what's called infections. which are different missions, and there are going to be different cards that'll go into the center deck. These are denoted by the orange color around their border. But it's a nice way of having multiple ways of playing the game. Each turn, you're going to do a normal deck building set of actions. You're going to draw cards from your hand. You're going to have a starting deck of 10 cards. You're going to use experience, which in this game is the currency, you could say. You're going to acquire new cards from the Starbase, but then you're also going to have the option of exploring. Now, let me show you some things before we get into a starting round. The starting deck consists of 3 ensigns, which again provide you 1 experience point, and when you complete a mission, you can trash this card, which is to remove it from your deck, and you can completely just get rid of it and not have to worry about it. Lieutenants, you're going to have 2 of. These provide you 2 experience, and when you complete a mission, you can upgrade it to a commander. So I can get this out of my deck and upgrade it to someone that's going to give me a little more experience, which is nice. And finally, you're going to have 5 totally different cards. This is unique to this game. This is not a game where you have 7 of one type and 3 of another, or 4 of one type and 6 of another. No, this is a game where you're going to start off with the ability to generate 7 experience maximum between your lieutenants and your ensigns. And then you're going to have cards like this. Evasive Maneuvers. If you have a character in your bridge, which is your play area, with a cost of 6+, and again the cost is in the upper right hand corner of the card, then you may trash this card, and if you do, your flagship gets +3 speed. So you're going to start to give your flagship additional points. You also have Tricorders and hand phasers, which you notice say handheld. These must be given to a character in your bridge. And they will do many different things. This will give you +1 search, which we'll get to in a second. This one will give you during your turn, if the user has a cost of 5+, you can trash it, and if you do, you get 3 experience to spend on maneuvers. Now, each card in Starbase will either say maneuver, or character, or setup. Now, the 3 different types are very specific. We'll get into that in a second. Like I can tell, as you can tell already, there's a lot that goes on inside of this game. But in addition to the phasers and the tricorders, you have ship modifications, which says discard any number of cards from your hand, then draw the same number of cards, which is a great ability for a starting card. And Memory Alpha. Memory Alpha says upgrade 1 character from your hand or bridge to a character from Starbase costing up to 2 more. Now the common ensign, lieutenant, and commanders are considered part of Starbase, so you can do that with them. But what this means is that you're going to be able to start upgrading your characters immediately. There's no card that you have to get from the main Starbase cards to start doing that. This is something I found really unique and really refreshing about this game. It was a starting set of cards you actually felt like you could do something with, which was very, very refreshing. In addition, every character or every player is going to have a starship, which amazingly looks like the Enterprise, even though they're all the same. They all have 0 speed, 0 attack, and 0 diplomacy, but they start off with 8 shields. If you ever are destroyed, some bad things happen, but we'll get to that in a second as well. So in a traditional deck builder, in this case, you're going to draw 5 cards from your hand. You're going to play those cards to your open area, which is your bridge. You're going to use your experience points to acquire new cards that will go into your discard pile. And when a card is acquired, a new card from Starbase is going to be flipped out immediately to replace it. So if I had, let's say, 9 points of experience to spend, I could get a card costing 4 and a card costing 5. I could get 3 cards that cost 3. Any combination of cards worth the experience points that I can generate on my bridge. Now, one really cool thing. You saw earlier there was a card that said you get +1 search. Searching, naturally, every turn you can do once. There are cards that will give you plus searches, so you can do it more than once. What is searching? Well, searching is a really cool mechanic. Have you ever played a game of Ascension where the center cards to buy were just junk? and it wasn't going to help you, and you needed to get a different card. Well, searching allows you to discard a card from the main Starbase area and flip over a new card. So in this case, I discarded a card worth 6 and got a card worth 4. That can greatly benefit you. Having multiple searches can also put you in a position of discarding and trashing a card that you know one of your opponents is going to want to get. So it gives you both the flexibility to find a card that you might be able to afford, or the ability to go get rid of a card that you know your opponents are really hot for and want to get. That makes the Starbase very unique to me, because it's something that changes all the time, doesn't just change when you buy, but depending on what people are going to play, is going to change very rapidly, and the strategies involved of getting something cheaper or getting something away from your opponents. Now, once you start developing your deck and acquiring these cards that give you your statistics, you're going to be able to complete missions. But to complete missions, you need to explore. Well, similar to searching, you get one search naturally every turn. You also get one explore point, and that explore point can be spent one of two ways. You can either flip up the top card of the space deck and go exploring, or you can complete an already face-up mission. Now, missions will also give you back your explore point. So if I were to flip over this top card with my one natural explore point, it has a flip area action. You'll see in this blue area it says flip. Place the top 3 cards from the Starbase deck face down under this card. You get +1 mission explore. So I would take the top 3 cards from the Starbase deck, I would put it underneath this card, and then I would place it right back down here. I would get my 1 explore back, so I now have the option of pressing my luck and going into the deck again, or completing this if I can meet its goal. And its goal says 6 experience points. That means of the cards I have played or will play into my bridge, I have to be able to have 6 experience points. If I do, I complete it and I can put it with my starship. I will get 25 points for this one, and again, the average game will go to 300. And it says for a reward, look at the cards under this card and you may gain 1 non-special card and discard the rest. Non-special is just a denotion on the cards and some of the keywords. Some will say special. Very few of them are special though, so it's non-specials are going to be a majority of the cards that are in there. Now, in addition to missions, there are events, and events are something that are not optional. So a mission, when it's flipped face up, could stay there. If I couldn't complete that this turn, it would stay there, and on the next player's turn, they would have the option of using their face up or using their explorer to complete a face up mission. There's also events, diplomatic tactics. This is an actual fight. It says flip, all players perform a battle. But there are some events that are going to require you to complete them immediately, not have to battle other players. So for example, if you were to go in and face off against this card, the Gamesters of Triskelion, and I probably am slaughtering that name. This one says goal, +6 attack and +3 diplomacy. If the cards that you've played in your bridge don't equal that, then you have to deal with your fail. Trash 1 random character in your discard area and then move this card to the bottom of the space deck. If you do complete it, you get 75 points, which is great. But how does that go to complete that? Well, if I need 6 attack and 3 diplomacy, what I would need to do is look at the cards in my bridge. Let's say, for example, I had Red Alert and I had an ensign and a lieutenant. When you stack the cards, you can see that these bars will line up. So if these were the cards in my bridge, I would have 3 speed, 3 attack, no diplomacy, and 2 shields. This is a really quick, easy way of being able to see what it is and how your cards are going to help you when you go exploring. In this case, if I'd flip this card up, I would not have the attack or diplomacy, so I would fail and I'd have to trash a card on my discard area. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of randomness that comes up inside of the space deck. There's a lot of things that early on you may not want to go exploring because you may not have the right statistics for the cards that you have. Now back to the battles real quick. While you have the missions and the missions being optional, the events being mandatory or failing, you also have battles. And you'll see in this case there's an order. Diplomacy plus experience points, then speed, then shields, and then attack. And the reward is each opponent's flagship receives 5 damage. So if you win this battle tactics, or this fight against other players, you're going to get 50 points. But in addition, you're going to be able to deal 5 damage to each opponent's flagship. Now, when you battle, everyone is going to have the option of playing cards from their hand to use the colored areas to increase their ship statistics. When you do this in a battle, the only thing you're worried about are the colored bars and the color statistics. And the order in which these go down is going to determine who wins the fight. So the person with the highest diplomacy and XP is going to deal damage first, and then moving on down the chain. If for any reason your flagship, your starship, is destroyed, remember you start with 8 shields, you have additional shields that you can add by the characters and their stats and their abilities. If you're ever destroyed, you're not completely out of the game. What it means is you're going to take your hand, all the cards that are in your bridge area, because again, even though it's not your turn perhaps, you're going to be able to play cards to your bridge area to enhance your starship's abilities. And you're going to take your discard pile, you're going to gain an ensign, and you're going to shuffle everything up. Now that may sound cool because you're gaining a card, but it's bad because the ensigns are very basic. So if you keep losing battles, you're going to end up with a lot of basic cards in your hand, and it's going to slow you down. So it's not terrible because it's not like you're shot out of space and completely destroyed, but it's not good either because it's going to slow you down and you're going to have to catch up to get back into the game. Overall, mechanic-wise, it's very unique. The fact that you can search through cards from the main center area and change what's out here turn by turn, and not even by buying things, but just by searching, is very cool and very unique. The fact that each of the starting cards do something when you complete missions is also very cool and very unique. It creates a starting set of cards with purpose. The space deck from missions, events, and battles is also very random and brings a lot of unknown to the game, which when you think about it from a thematic standpoint actually works, because what are you doing in Star Trek but going off into space and exploring? Now, in addition to the standard space deck and the 300 points that you are going to complete, there is that other set of the infection cards, which gives you another scenario to play against and create a separate space deck, which is very nice because it gives you flexibility and varies up the gameplay. But in general, you're going to be playing cards from your hand, acquiring new and better cards, and then you're going to be going out into space and exploring. Now, one of the big challenges that we haven't talked about yet is the fact that in the space deck, in the Starbase deck, the majority of the cards are unique. There's not 10 James T. Kirks. There's a couple, but they're all different. We'll get into that in our final overview, but it's good to know that there is a large majority of difference of the cards you're going to see out here. So gameplay is going to be fresh, it's going to be unique, and it's going to be different the multiple times that you play through. So that's Star Trek, the original series deck building game. But what do I think? Well, as we showed you in the gameplay footage, the Starbase is very unique. The fact that I can just trash any card that I want and go searching for something else to come out is really cool. I like the ability to be able to do that, and if there's a lot of higher cost cards, I still have an opportunity to go get something. It doesn't always work out, but the option's there. And if there's anything I took away from playing this game, it's there is a multitude of options available to the players. And it is not a game that you are just going to jump into and start playing because you're familiar with other deck building games. This is really, in my opinion, a thinking man's deck building game. The majority of the cards that are in Starbase are unique, meaning you're not going to find multiple copies of the cards in there. There are some, but there's not a lot. It makes sense because these are characters from the universe of Star Trek, and there shouldn't be 5 different James T. Kirks. There are multiple James T. Kirks, but they all do different things. That was probably the hardest part about starting off with this game, was having to learn what all of the different cards did, how they interacted well with each other. In a lot of other deck building games, it's very easy to see, okay, let me take Ascension for example. If I know there's 10 cards in the Lifebound set, and I know that there are 3 copies of this one card that'll let me draw cards, well, if somebody else gets that, I know there's probably going to be more coming out here. In this game, because there are so many limited copies and one copy of a specific card, if somebody else gets that, you have to then start to strategize, what are you going to do with what's left in Starbase? How are you going to combat the new ability that they've gotten? And how are you going to balance the gameplay to make sure that you are still going to come out on top? The other thing that I really like about this game is the stacking of the cards, and how when you put cards into play in your bridge, you can easily add up what each of the stats are, whether it's speed, attack, diplomacy, or shields, and quickly see not only what the cards are going to do for you by being placed into your bridge, but understand what stats you have to go complete missions, and if a battle scenario comes up, what you're going to have to fight it out in that combat situation. That also is another thing that is really cool, which is this space exploration deck. This is very random and it's very different. It's not the traditional, I'm going to fight against something that's out here as a monster or a bad guy in a dungeon or anything like that. It's really random, almost too random, to the effect of early in the game you may not want to go delving around in here because you don't have all the stats you need. What we have found in a lot of our games is we held off until 3rd or 4th turn to really dig into that space deck for fear of flipping up a event that was going to hurt you. Now we also found that there were some events that if you didn't complete them actually benefited you early in the game. They could get you a lieutenant, or they could get you some more ensigns, which early in the game could help you out. Now, additionally, something that I really liked was the starting deck. You had your 3 ensigns and you had your 2 lieutenants. Very basic, you have your XP, and you're able to move through the game and acquire new cards to originally start off. But the fact that the ensigns and the lieutenants each allow you to gain a bonus when you complete a mission was really nice. It didn't feel as though they were just starting cards that I wanted to banish and get rid of as soon as possible, but they were starting cards with a purpose, and that was really cool. Additionally, the 5 other cards that you start your game with are very different from any other deck builder I've seen. They're really more mechanic driven than card driven, because what they let me do are special things to help out and build my deck quicker and acquire things faster, and really do something that I've never seen a deck builder do, which is accelerate itself. A lot of deck builders start off with a very standard set of cards, and it's really about acquiring the common cards and getting rid of your starting cards. There's some cards in here in your starting deck you're going to want to keep with you the whole way through the game, and you're not going to want to get rid of. And the fact that they were able to put a value on those based on what you can acquire from Starbase was really cool and very unique. The combination of pulling all of this together is actually pretty amazing. The challenge is that there's so much going on between the different stats at the very bottom of the card that you have to learn, the triggered abilities of all the cards that you can acquire, and the fact that in this giant deck there's not a lot of duplicates and you have to understand what's available to you. And the randomness of all of the missions, the events, and the battles that could come out from this space exploration deck really make it a game that you have to play multiple times before you're really going to start to enjoy it. Is it enjoyable? Yes, it's extremely enjoyable. It's very unique in design. It's something I've never seen before in terms of having both the ability to upgrade your cards and get better, to battle, quote unquote, the missions and try to complete them with the statistics of the cards that you're going to acquire, and the battles that you have amongst each player. The battle scenarios are really cool, and they can really impact and sway the game. It doesn't seem like much that if your starship reaches 0 and you have no more health or hit points on it, that you just have to discard things and shuffle up and draw new cards. But that little shift can make a big difference in the gameplay. And it's subtle, but it's very well designed. Overall, the components are good. They are not great, they're good. The card quality we've already seen from just basic shuffling, already getting some scratches and dings and dents around the edges of the cards. They're a good card stock, but they're not the best by any means whatsoever. They're average, I would say. The pictures are great. Not being a Star Trek fan, I still enjoyed looking at the artwork and looking at the pictures from the series, being reminded of seeing those shows when I was a kid, and being pulled into that universe. Thematically, this is a phenomenal game. I mean, when you look at the fact that the idea of the Starship Enterprise was to boldly go into space and explore places where man had not been before, that's what this game is all about. It's about recruiting new members to your starship, going out into space, and dealing with, well, quite frankly, the randomness that James T. Kirk had to deal with. When he was the captain of the Enterprise and he went out into space, he didn't know what he was going to get into. The same thing happens to you and your fellow players. When you flip cards from this deck, you could run into terror, you could run into good things, and that makes it very exciting. Unfortunately, it also makes it very random. And while you could take the time to learn the cards in the Starbase Deck, take the time to learn the subtleties of the starting cards and how to best manipulate the beginning part of the game, you could still end up in a position where every card you flip over from here is going to be uncompletable by the stats that you have. And that was a real detractor from it. Because while the gameplay is very good and the design is very well put together, there's almost too much happening at once to make it a game where you can plan out your path to victory. And for that, we're going to go ahead and give the Star Trek The Original Series deck building game a hit. It is very unique, it is very creative, and it is very fun to play. But there is a lot of randomness in the mission deck. There is a lot of randomness from the fact that so few cards are duplicated in that Starbase deck that it does take a lot of effort to get into and enjoy the game. Now, if you want to invest that effort, I highly recommend it because you're going to find a very, very fun game. This is a unique deck builder and one that I can see hitting tables many, many times. One caveat, if you're not a Star Trek fan, it's going to take a lot of patience to learn this game. I was not a Star Trek fan going into this. I am not a Star Trek fan coming out of this. But it does force you to kind of look and delve into the universe a little bit more than an average player would. If you are a Star Trek fan, I would almost go as far as to say this game is a crit for you. If you're a Star Trek fan and a deck building fan, it is without a doubt a crit for you. You will love it. But for the average gamer, who I do my reviews for, this is a hit of a game. It is very fun, it is very unique, it is very creative, but there is a lot of thinking, a lot of understanding, a lot of delving into the game repeated times to understand for you to truly gain the enjoyment out of it. But again, like boldly going into space where no man has gone before, you take those risks. Just make sure your phasers are set to stun. We hope you enjoyed this review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to leave your comments here on the YouTube channel. Of course, you can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Google Plus by searching Crits Happen, and at our homepage at critshappen.com. But until we see you next time, we hope that you enjoy your adventures in the vastness of space. Keep rolling those dice, and we hope they're all crits.